The dial string is finally on, looking real good, and I put a knob on just to check it out. It's working fine. So that string is really strong. It's a little thicker than normal dial string, but the kid bead string will do the job. Now I've got to, let me see, I need to remove the dial scale that I stored away in that box for safekeeping early on in the restoration, and the needle. Okay, there's the needle. Still in good shape, which is what I want. It's just my luck I'll damage it at this stage of the game. I hope not. Anyway, this baby here will go be remounted just like so, and we'll go ahead and attach the screws, and I think I'll turn it back on and see how accurate the dial is, or I'll have to set it. Well, it's about 10:45 at night. I always like to come home at night and listen to a little bit of country music on WSM out of Nashville, 650. It enables me to set my dial, which you can see was right on, and it kind of relaxes me after a day's work. I still have to put the treble and the bass switches in on each side, and I've got a pretty good idea on how to fix that broken one. So we'll see how that goes. I hope to have that done in a day or two, and if this thing continues to behave itself and perform like it's doing, then we'll be able to go ahead and put her back in the old cabinet. Okay, we're at the point of repairing this broken bass switch. Now this is the treble. This one's okay, and you'll notice that there's a clip right here that holds it in the cabinet. When you press this edge, this little metal thing right here, against one side of the cabinet, and then it snaps in using this clip on the other side of the cabinet. Unfortunately, that clip is broken off of the bass switch. It just popped right off, and it was laying down in the cabinet when I first got the console radio. So what I had to do is I'm going to have to come up with some sort of a fix, and this is what I came up with. I work in a factory setting, so I had a friend of mine who works in the metal shop. He made me a little clip out of brass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit this little clip. If I can get over here, I'm going to fit this little clip down in there like that, so it rests exactly where the other one was. Let me get that thing fitted in, and I'll get back with you. Okay, there it is, fitted in there. And what I have to do now is rough up the surfaces that are touching, and then use lots of JB weld to weld that thing in there. I drilled a hole down in that little dark circle area at the bottom where the brass is. I want to fill that little hole up with JB weld also, which will give me a little better anchoring point. So let's get that thing out of there and start roughing it up with my moto tool. In order for the JB weld to adhere better, it's always good to have a good rough surface on both of the items that you're sticking together. So what I'm going to do is take this little wheel right here, and I'm just going to kind of move it back and forth a little bit, and then move it over here and sort of up and down on there, and see if I can't get that thing rough enough for the JB Weld to grab it. Alright, it's all roughed up down in there, nice and shiny as you can see. And I roughed up the two surfaces on the brass. So now we're going to mix up a little JB Weld. I've always been a big fan of JB Weld. It comes in two tubes, the hardener and what they call the steel, which is actually the cement, I guess. And you just lay out a couple of equal lengths and just stir it together, like so. Now look, one thing about mixing up any kind of cement, whether it be epoxy or JB Weld or steel or whatever that requires a mixing. Mix from the outside to the center. Never just mix it around the center like this, because you'll inadvertently always pick up some of the non-mixed stuff and get it in there, and it won't harden very well. Always mix. It's hard to do with one hand here, but always mix toward the center. Center, center, center. Pull it in, stir it, pull it in, and stir it. Always toward the center. Get a little glob after it's all mixed up. You get a little glob and stick down in there. Come back a little bit more and just sort of glob it down in there. And after I get a good coating on it, I'll go ahead and set in the brass piece, and that'll cause some of it to squish out, of course, but I want to fill that hole real good that I drilled down in there. Yeah, it's not lighting up too well inside this camera, even though I've got a lamp on it. Okay, let's put it on both sides. Let me go ahead and fit that brass piece down in there, and we'll pick it up from there. She's sitting in there nicely. Now we'll go ahead and smear a little bit more around the top and around the sides even. Well, there it is, all JB welded in. I may have to, after it dries, I'll test it for strength, and I may have to put a second coating. I'll rough up the surface again of the JB Weld that's dry, and I may put a little bit more on there. It all depends on how it looks after it dries. Hopefully this will solve the problem. It's all dry now, or at least dry enough for me to work with. I set it out in the sun for about 2 hours, and it'll take the rest of the night to actually cure up the way it's supposed to. But it's dry enough where I can work on it. And what I want to do is, originally the two wires that came off the chassis soldered to one soldered to a tab on each of these switches. I don't like that idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a black and a red wire on each one, and then run it inside the cabinet to a connector, some sort of connector. I'm not sure what I'm going to do now at this moment, how I'm going to do it, but it'll be a connector, and we no longer will have to unsolder the wires from these switches if they need to come out and be cleaned or anything. So that's my next step. The red and black wires have been soldered on, but unfortunately I said if this thing continues to behave itself that we could get it back in the cabinet. Well, guess what? It's not behaving itself. The treble switch, when it's hooked up to these two wires, the treble works fine. These two wires right here. However, when I hook up the base switch to these two wires over here, which is this one right here, nothing happens. I can flip the switch out, I can flip the switch in, I can just take these two wires, the green and blue, and I can just jumper them with a gator wire between them, and still there's no change in base at all, none that I can detect. And I also, just to be on the inquisitive side, I went ahead and took a .005 capacitor, and I went ahead and put that across the green and blue wire also to see if it would make any difference, and it did not. So apparently there's a wire associated with these two wires underneath that's not hooked up properly. We'll see what happens. I'll just take another look. Although the radio still plays well. Well, I'm happy to report that the problem with the bass control was not something that I caused. Unfortunately, we have a break inside the volume control. Right here where you see this circle, there's a break right here. And I've blown this section up to show you what I'm talking about. Here you can see the voltage comes up through this. This is the bass button right here. The voltage, when this button is closed, when this these two contacts are made and the button is pressed in, the voltage will come up, come across, go through, up through here, through R2, and up to this tap, which is on the inside of the volume control knob. Well, that thing is broken. And what's happening is there was never any voltage which feeds on up into the output amplifier, or actually the detector amplifier. And when this button is opened, what happens is the voltage comes up and it goes through this capacitor right here, and then it will again go through here, through R2, through the tap, and then on up again to the tube. Well, with this thing broken right here, voltage was coming up, and that's about as far as it got. Right there, she stopped. So what I did was I disconnected the wire from here. And right now I have it gator wired in, but I'm going to solder it to the center tap. I'll just move it over here to the center tap. So what will happen is the voltage will come up, work normally through this switch, but instead of tap going through this section right here, it'll go through a little further down. And of course, I did that by gatoring it in, and the bass wasn't all that much of a change. I did detect change. This is a 0.005 microfarad capacitor, so I changed it to a 0.001. I could have gone with a 0.002 or 3 or whatever, but I think the first thing out of the bag was a 0.001, so I went ahead and gatored it in, and it sounds pretty good. It looks like a bowl of spaghetti in the radio right now with all those wires hanging out here and there and everywhere. But let's go inside and see what it looks like and take a listen. Here it is. This looks like a whole bunch of crap here, but it's really not that difficult. I just have this switch here gator wired into the two blue wires coming out from underneath the chassis. That's simple. And I've done the same thing over here with these two wires coming out from underneath the chassis. And then I originally had this 0.005 capacitor here that I told you about soldered in across these two contacts right here. But I lifted one end of it, and I have the 0.001 gatored in with the yellow and red wire that you see right here, here, and here. So let's listen to this thing just to show you that it does work. I'll crank up the volume, and then I'll activate the treble, and then I'll come over here and activate the bass, and you'll be able to see the differences here. Here we go. Here's the treble. I guess you don't really need it that loud here. Here we go.
What are the bullet points that should
That's
be
the treble.
Well, I try to look at Vic through the lens of race, and it really comes down to two things. First of all, I think that just the way that he approaches the game.
And of course, here's the bass.
A sort of African-American thing to it. There's just this, I see this black joie de vivre in the way that he moves through the field, his impulse to improvisation.
Okay, all I have to do now is put a couple of connectors. I'm going to go to Radio Shack this weekend and get a couple of connectors for the 2-pin connectors for the yellow and black wire on this one, and to connect to these two blue ones, and another 2-pin connector for the same setup on this side. And then of course I have to remove this capacitor and solder in the smaller one across the contacts. Until next time, hopefully when we'll mess with the turntable a little bit maybe. I still have to remove the speaker board from the radio and see if I can find some cloth for it at one of our local Hancock stores. Until then, this is John.
Hasta la vista, baby.